Hello, welcome listeners and market participants to KBRA's European Credit Podcast, Conversations in European Credit. I'm Gordon Kerr, Head of European Research at KBRA, and today I am joined by Paul De Lange from our Investor Relations team here at KBRA.
Thank you for having me on today, Gordon. It's a pleasure to be here.
Today we will be covering a topic of interest to many of our listeners, the European securitization markets and its recent public resurgence. As a part of our regular coverage of the sector, we produce a quarterly update on issuance with a focus on the transactions that are actually sold into the market and into investors. The report can be found on kbra.com along with historical quarterly publications going back over the last several years. Further, you can of course find plenty of our comments on the various topics facing the securitization markets in Europe as well. Let's look a little deeper. European securitization has been challenged by regulatory issues as well as low-cost financing offered by the central banks to support the banking sector and lending. The result has been a benign environment for securitization over the last several years. However, this appears to be changing, both in terms of the volumes coming to the market as well as the noises for regulatory change and support. Paul, what do you think investors' thoughts are with regards to the strong volumes of issuance we have seen so far this year?
Well, they've been kept very busy. Things have slowed a bit this summer, but the pipeline continues to build. I think broadly, investors are happy with the state of the market. Interest in the sector is picking up after many years of benign interest. As the KBRA survey you did in May showed, they had been expecting this uptick in activity, and they expect it to continue into the end of the year. As they stated in their survey responses, they are positive on the market and expect both performance and issuance to remain positive in the near term. But let's see what they say in December, though. Anyway, what about you? What are your thoughts on the direction of travel?
Yes, busy is an understatement for the second quarter. It was the strongest quarter since 2007 for new transactions sold to investors in European markets. The first quarter demonstrated a healthy start to the year with ongoing growth in newly circulated transaction volumes, but the second quarter broke records. In addition, the second quarter saw the smallest quarterly volume of retained issuance since 2019.
That retained picture is particularly interesting. The European Central Bank has retreated from bank funding and liquidity with the maturing of its targeted long-term refinancing operations, or TLTROs. The use of these peaked at over 2 trillion euros in the midst of the COVID pandemic. Now it has dramatically collapsed.
Yes, it has collapsed to levels that have not been seen since before the global financial crisis. The banks are back to making use of traditional sources of funding, the capital markets. As a result, we have seen and are likely to continue to see the return of many bank issuers, although many have diversified some of their historical funding to cover bonds and other sources.
As your report does, let's focus on what actually makes it into the market. Has there been a difference between the EU and the UK?
Broadly speaking, yes. Issuance in the euro area for transactions sold to investors has increased year over year to reach a total of 31 billion in the first half of 2024. This is an increase of 10 billion or nearly 50% over the 21 billion in the first half of 2023. Euro area volumes of transactions sold to investors are higher than the volume of transactions from the UK so far, with 26 billion in the first half of 2024 in the UK. However, this is also a large increase from 2023 for the UK. Volumes in the euro area were spread across a number of regions. Italy had the largest increase in volumes with 8 billion of transactions versus the 1.5 billion sold in the first half of 2023. German volumes also increased to 8.5 billion, up from 7 billion in the first half last year. And one country where volumes are actually down year over year is France, with a decrease of roughly 2 billion in comparison to 2023.
What sectors were the areas of focus in these strong levels of issuance?
Well, newly circulated transactions in residential mortgage-backed securities and CLOs continue to dominate the issuance volumes and again grew year over year. However, this year, nearly all sectors are showing growth. In particular, consumer ABS volumes have increased to a first half pace not seen since the first half of 2006, with 9 billion euros, an increase over the 2 billion in the first half of 2023, And further, this is more than double the largest first half numbers from 2018 through 2023. So some pretty impressive surge in growth there.
This is very impressive indeed. And what about the numbers in the other sectors? Could you expand on this?
Yeah, well, RMBS volumes increased to nearly 30 billion for the first half for transactions sold to investors, which is up from 18.5 billion in the same period last year. UK issuers still account for a dominant portion of those volumes, supported by a return of the prime RMBS issuers. CLO transactions are also higher than in prior years, with a strong year-to-date issuance level. In fact, volumes in the first half were a total of 25 billion, which is double last year's mark and marks the highest first half ever. Auto ABS remains a consistent part of the investor market, up again year over year with 14 billion sold to investors versus 12 billion in the first half of 2023. Commercial ABS transactions have also increased with just over 1 billion in 2024. And despite concerns about the commercial real estate market, CMBS has returned with data center and logistics transactions sold to investors compared to the absence of issuance in the first half of 2023.
You mentioned that the UK dominates the RMBS volumes, but this is not just about the return of prime RMBS, is it? Prime issuance can be the majority of RMBS volumes sold to investors, but there are other sectors that make use of the securitization markets, especially in the UK. Was there anything particularly interesting in this sector in the first half?
Yes, as you say, prime volumes are important in the RMBS market, but this year, prime RMBS volumes were under half the volume for the first half of this year. They did increase year over year with 13 billion versus the nearly 12 billion last year. However, the driver of this year's RMBS volume growth so far has mainly been the increase in transactions outside of that prime collateral. In the first half of last year, there was 7 billion of transactions of non-prime collateral. This has grown in 2024 already to reach a total of nearly 17 billion. Now, out of this, there was 7 billion of buy-to-let volumes, 5 billion of non-conforming collateral, and 3 billion of what are referred to as mixed mortgage collateral, which can be a combination of buy-to-let and second lien or other various mixes. Further, there was 3.5 billion of RMBS that was refinanced in the first half, plus 1.3 billion that was reoffered.
The reoffered was the stock and drop issuance.
Yes, the Nationwide Building Society originated a transaction and a fair bit of hype last year by retaining it and holding it in stock. And then on 2 occasions this year, they brought those originally created volumes to the market, the drop part, and it appeared to work relatively well, but it is still uncertain if it will be tried again.
What about the regions of the RMBS volumes? Typically, the UK dominates this segment of the market, no?
Yes, the UK is dominating RMBS volumes as it has done in prior years with 18 billion. However, Italy has returned to the publicly sold RMBS market in the first half of the year for the first time in 10 years with 4 billion in 2024. This is followed by the 3 billion of RMBS transactions with collateral from Ireland and a similar amount from the Netherlands. There was less than 1 billion from France, which is known for, when it comes to the market, having a large transaction. So when issuance returns from France, it could come in significant size. But significantly, Spain has remained quiet with no issuance so far this year.
And lastly, what about the market that has been on fire right now, CLOs?
Yes, it certainly has been on fire. CLO activity increased to a post-global financial crisis quarterly high for newly circulated transactions with 14 billion. This is higher than the Q4 of 2021, where there was 13 billion, and brings the first half total to 25 billion in new transactions. This is the strongest start to a year since 2007, as the arbitrage improved and demand for senior notes drove AAA tranche spreads down to 130 basis points or lower, as was predicted in a global ABS panel poll, funnily enough. Managers took advantage of the available window for issuance and have brought the market out of its 2023 lull. This may also be partially driven by a topic that we covered in a report earlier in the year, as nearly 1/3 of European CLO market transaction volumes have ended their reinvestment periods and are currently amortizing. So this supports both the desire for new issuance from both investors and managers. Manager interest in resets and refinancing has also increased, with 4 billion reset and just under $500 million refinanced. This continues and is expected to continue into the second half of the year, so long as the environment remains in its current positive state.
Great. Thank you, Gordon. I thought it was a very interesting discussion.
Thank you very much, Paul. I hope you enjoyed your first podcast foray, and we look forward to our next conversation. I think we covered a number of items that investors will find interested in learning more about.
Thanks, Gordon.
It is still too early to tell if the first half momentum in European securitization markets will persist into the remainder of the year. The question is whether issuers have merely timed their transactions to avoid the potential volatility from various election periods in the second half, some of which may have now been resolved, like the European Commission, France, and the UK, or the removal of bank liquidity support by central banks has forced issuers more consistently back into the market. The answer likely includes a combination of both factors. As Paul highlighted, our recent investor survey revealed, expectations are for this momentum to continue through year-end. This was bolstered further by the positive mood at the sector's annual conference, Global ABS, as we highlighted in our daily recaps of the conference. The pipeline has slowed from the second quarter's strong pace as we are currently into the summer period, but sentiment remains positive for now, and things look positive for the autumn. That's it from us today. As always, we hope these conversations in credit hope to illuminate the many trends taking shape across the markets. For more in-depth coverage of the themes discussed today, or to learn more about our unique approach to credit, sign up to the KBRA website to read all of our research and content. Have a topic idea or comment you'd like to share? Reach out to me or Paul on today's episode. Be sure to rate, share, like, and subscribe to this podcast so you can be notified when new content is available. Invite your colleagues as well. We'd love to count you all as informed listeners. This is Gordon Kerr thanking you for being part of the conversation. Take care, everyone.